women for the whole weekend. Really neat place. I really have respect for that place. It's pretty awesome. So, kick this off. Think about that. Genius or insanity. Somewhere in my psychology class, I had heard this term that there's a hairline between a genius and an idiot. You know, usually we have this, like in psychology, we do have genius and idiot on the other end, right? But there's like a circle. And I did know someone in college who was a genius and yet an idiot at the same time. Honestly, I could, remember those days we had rat tail combs in our pockets, guys? Some of the older guys remember that? So I'd be able to take my rat tail comb to this guy, and I'd be able to do this. And he'd be able to tell me how many teeth were in that comb. Photographic memory, which doesn't really exist, but it's called by another name that's very similar. But at the same time, this guy was really awkward socially, like just totally awkward socially, and he died at the age of 24 for a good reason. Sad, because he was a genius. Like he was told, he could read a book once and recite it. Totally amazing. Well, genius or insanity? Some people have to stretch their heads at that. Well, I want to share two parables today, and both of them start off with these words. For the kingdom of heaven is like. And that's kind of one of Jesus' famous little sayings. He would say, for the kingdom of heaven is like, and then he'd tell a story. And when you stop and think about it, in every one of these stories, it was really about a person who represented the kingdom of heaven. So, in other words, Jesus was kind of saying, for God is like. He's saying, this is what God is like. Let me tell you what God is like. And so the first story comes in the book of Matthew, starting with verse 1. The kingdom of heaven is like the owner of an estate who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. Okay, so keep that in mind. The owner of this farm, this vineyard, this is God. The kingdom of heaven is like this guy. Okay? So it starts like this. He agreed to pay them a denarius, which translated, if you look at the Bible, it means a day's wage. A fair day's wage. So I just kind of took a rough, what would be a fair day's wage for a hired hand on the farm, and, you know, go with the Canadian laws of about time and a half. And it's about $300. I'd say it's close to $300, taxes and everything included, gross wages for a day. So he says he agrees to pay them $300 for the day. And they go, that's fair wage, and they go to work. That's how it starts, right? Well, about the third hour, he went and saw others standing around the marketplace doing nothing. Now, I used to live in Africa, and it was so confusing over there, where I lived, basically in the boonies, because we would use a different time. We would use biblical time. So 1 o'clock was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and 2 o'clock was like 8 o'clock. And so you'd have to take the time that I was used to and subtract 1 and add 6 or something like that. It was really confusing. It was hard, but I got used to it after a while. Third hour is about 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay? So he goes back to the village square, looking for more workers at about 9 o'clock in the morning. So the sun's up about 6, let's say, approximately. And, but, you know, I got to share this. I think it's so fascinating. In the Jewish way of keeping time, an hour wasn't necessarily 60 minutes. No, as a matter of fact, here's how the Jews did in the Bible. When the sun came up, that was the beginning of the first hour, and it was 12 hours in a day. So when the sun went down, that was the end of the 12th hour. So they would take the daylight and divide it by 12, and that would be how much an hour was. So in some seasons, the hour was 72 minutes or so. In some seasons, the hour was less than 60 minutes. Cool, eh? Weird, though. But anyway, I just thought that was pretty fascinating. So it's the third hour. So in other words, you take the day, you chop it into 12 pieces, and this is like about a quarter of the way through the day. So these guys are hanging around. These are probably the guys that slept in and had a hot breakfast, you know, and didn't want to get out in the chilly air. So the sun's already out, kind of warming up things, and they're hanging around looking for work, and he hires them. But listen, he told them, you also go work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever's right. He didn't say 300 bucks for the day. He simply said, I'll pay you whatever's right. Now, these guys must have trusted this guy. I don't know if he had a reputation or what they knew about this guy, but they went. It's kind of amazing. Would you do that? I don't know if I would or not, but whatever. They went. Well, apparently, the owner of the vineyard started to see how things are progressing, and he thought, it's going to get dark, another 6 hours, so I don't know if we're going to get these grapes off here. Maybe it's going to get freezing tonight, so I better go back to town. So he goes back at the 6th hour, and then he goes back again at the 9th hour, and he does the same thing. Same thing. I'll pay you whatever's fair. Get some more recruits for his vineyard. And then things must have really got down to the crunch, because he goes at the 11th hour of daylight to get more people. 11th hour. And he goes down to the village square, and he finds these other guys standing around, and this is a really weird thing to say. He says, why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing? Yeah, they weren't there, but isn't the benefit of the doubt, I guess. Because no one hired us. They go along with this thing. He thinks we've been standing here all day. How? Because no one hired us, they answered. So he says, you go work. I don't know what this guy was like or what his reputation was like, but he says, go work in my vineyard. They go. And so it comes out, end of the day, when the evening comes, the owner of the vineyard says to the foreman, now call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones and going to the first. The people who show up an hour before sunset, work 1 hour, they get paid first. The people that have been working under the sun all day long, the heat, they got BO, they're sore muscles, they have to stand at the end of the line to get paid. I'd be kind of well ticked, wouldn't you? But anyway, here's what happens. The workers who were hired about the 11th hour came, and they each received 300 bucks. They didn't know what they're going to get, right? Just go to my vineyard. That's all he said. Go to my vineyard. He didn't even tell these people, I'll give you a fair wage. He says, go get to my vineyard. I need help. They get 300 bucks. Well, you can imagine what the people were thinking who came at the 3rd hour, because he didn't tell them how much they were getting. He just said a fair wage. So they're doing the math. They're doing the math. You get it? Here, 300 bucks for 1 hour. We've been here for 9. What's he going to give us? And then the people that came at the very beginning on the 1st hour, they're probably thinking, oh, he must have changed his mind. Right? Guess what? So when those who came were hired first, they expected to receive more. Wouldn't you? Absolutely. But each of them received 300 bucks. Well, would you complain? They did. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you've made them equal to us who've borne the burden of work in the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I guess they must have sent a representative, friend. Isn't that a cool word? You could have said slave, servant, lease, hired hand. But friend, I'm not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for $300 today? The ones that came first. These are the ones that came first of the day. They were the ones complaining the most. Then he says this. He says, take your pay and go. After all, I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you. I wanted to do that. That's what I wanted to do. So, don't I have the right to do what I want with my money? Are you envious because I'm so generous? Genius or insanity? Kind of weird, isn't it? It's not fair. Right? It's not fair. It's not fair. Isn't it? It's not fair. Spent about 20 minutes on the phone yesterday afternoon with the mother of a 30-year-old client. Still sticking up for their daughter. But it's not fair. Your rule wasn't applied. life fairly? How come this person gets out and my daughter gets out? Well, it's not fair. There's much more to the story. I know you know that, but I'm not going to go there. But so many times, isn't that life? It's not fair. This guy gets off for 2 years for rape. It's not fair. You hear these stories all the time, right? It's not fair. It's grace. The next story is found in Matthew 18. And again, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king. This time, the king represents God. Well, that's more of a fitting kind of natural, kind of simple, but nevertheless, he's a king. But this is God. The kingdom of heaven can be compared to God, this king, who decided to bring his accounts up to date. Well, I think kings have a right to do that once in a while, right? People owe the money, let's call them in, see if we can get some accounts squared up here. In the process, one of his debtors, just one, he comes in, he owes him 10,000 talents. He did the math, $20 million in today's currency. $20 million. Does that sound like a big debt? Nothing compared to the American debt, but nevertheless. But for us, $20 million. Let me give you a little bit of an idea of what $20 million is if you owe this much. First of all, he said he couldn't pay. Well, guess why? You know, a good interest rate today is like 3%, right? You can get a 3% interest rate, you're doing really well. That's usually for a house. Well, the interest would be $600,000 a year on $20 million. But your more typical personal loan, like I just paid one off recently for some furniture I bought, was 8.5%. At that rate, the interest alone would be at $1.7 million a year. That's just the interest. Now, of course, the king could have said, oh, no interest. I won't worry about the interest. You just give me the principal. Well, an average payment for a loan, I think that most of us in this room could afford, would be $300 a month. That would take us 5,500 years to pay off without any interest. Now, do you get the significance of this loan, this debt? It was impossible. That was what Jesus was trying to say. What he was trying to say in this parable is what you owe the king is impossible to pay off. You cannot do it. You just can't do it. But guess what this guy does? He doesn't say, oh, it's impossible, so forgive me. He says, oh, I'll pay it all off, right? Well, the king says, so the king ordered the man sold for the debt, also his wife and children, everything he had, trying to get something out of it. But the man fell down before the king, his face in the dust, and said, oh, sir, be patient with me, I'll pay it off. Idiot. How can you do that? It's impossible. That's the whole point of the parable. It's impossible, but he still thinks he can do it. Well, the king was filled with pity for him. Wow. And released him and forgave him the debt. If somebody owed me $20, that'd be kind of $20 million. That'd be kind of a hard one to let go of. But when the man left the king, here's the biter here. He went to a man who owed him 2,000. And I did the math again on what this guy owed. Did it math up, brought it up to date. Owed him $2,000, grabbed him by the throat, demanded instant payment for $2,000. Well, even in today's currency, instant payment, $2,000 might be pretty hard for most of us in this room, right? But he wanted instant payment. Think about it. Here's the math. 20 million is to 2,000 as 10,000 is to 1. He owed 1/10,000th of the debt he was just forgiven. And he demanded instant payment. Now, if you do the math, 1/10,000th of 2,000 is 20 cents. So it'd be like if I owed someone 2,000 and he said, Don, I like you a lot, forget it. $2,000. Okay, I could do a lot with it, but that would be awesome. I'd be like, whoa, let's go out for dinner, man. Like, it would be celebrating time. And then I would turn around and ask this guy for 20 cents, and if you don't pay up now, I'm putting you in jail. That's proportion. You see what, this is totally insane, isn't it? I mean, really, this parable is just, it's totally insane. It's total exaggeration, of course, for effect, to give you an idea of what life is really like when it comes to the sin account, right? So, the man fell down before him and begged him to give him a little more time. Be patient, and I will pay it, he pled. Now, 2,000 probably would have been doable versus 20 million, right? He probably could have gone to work, worked a little harder, and picked up 2,000 bucks and paid his debt. This is not 20 million. This is 2,000. That's a doable debt. But guess what? But the creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and jailed until the debt was paid off in full. Now, of course, this guy had some good friends, as they went to task, and his friends went to the king and told him what happened. I'm glad, I would love friends like that. I mean, this is ridiculous. King, you know this guy that you forgave him 20 million, it's all over town. You know what he did? His friend came, and he wouldn't let him have any more time to pay his 2,000 bucks. He threw him in jail. So the king called for him, the man he had forgiven, and he said, "You evil-hearted wretch, here, I forgave you all that tremendous debt just because you asked me to." Question, did he ask him to forgive that debt? He did not. Talk about giving the guy the benefit of the doubt. This is ridiculous. He didn't ask him to, but he just simply decided to. Shouldn't you have mercy on others just as I had mercy on you? That's the bottom line. That's the punchline right there. Because didn't Jesus teach us to pray something like that? Well, then the angry king sent the man to jail until he paid the last penny due. So shall my heavenly Father do to you if you refuse to truly forgive your brothers. This is really not about money. This is about forgiveness of the things people do to us. Jesus said, "Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us." So when we say, "God, forgive me my sins just the same way I forgive others," then I'm giving permission. I'm actually telling God that if I don't forgive this 20 cents, I'll be in jail. I'm saying that. When I pray that prayer, that's what I'm telling God. I'm just giving him permission. Not only permission, I'm telling him this. Do it. It's not fair, is it? Forgiving somebody 20 million bucks, just like that, it's not fair. It's grace. It doesn't make sense. Is this a genius idea, this grace, or is it just insanity? Is grace insanity, or is it ingenious? Which is it? Well, I've been tempted to think it's insanity sometimes. Haven't you? I remember when one of my sons, he was in high school, and I walked into his bedroom and looked in his closet. He had been drying marijuana with the household iron, and so I had a little chat. And in my chat, he said, "Dad, you told me God always forgives, right? So you told me God always forgives, right?" And I go, and my mind was really racing for words now. Yes, that's true. I've told you that, and I don't ever want you to forget that. So he says, so I can sow my wild oats, I can party, can do all the stuff I want to do, and then when I'm ready, I can just go to God and say, "Forgive me," and he will, right? Now I'm really searching for words. They came to me. I'm sure God gave me some words there. Chris, you're right. I want you never to forget this. Don't ever, ever forget that God will always, always, always forgive your sins when you ask him. Always. Always. Never forget. But if in your sinning you lose an arm, because you crash your car, because you whatever, you lose an arm, you have to live with that, even though you're forgiven. There's always a consequence to sin. Sin has its own consequences. You don't have to add them on the top, like a tax. Even if you're forgiven, there's a consequence to every sin. Never forget that. This past week is week 5 of a 6-week treatment program at work. I have women this time. Men start a week from now. And it's the week of forgiveness. And I have, out of 11, I had 9 by when this week started, because I lost 2 last weekend. They didn't relapse, they just chose to leave early. They're still doing well. That's good news to me. But these 9 women, my goal for the week is to have them by the end of the week forgive, because it's for them that they forgive. Forgiveness is for the forgiver. It is. It sets you free. And how do I communicate that? How do I communicate it? Because every single one of those 9 women has been raped at least once, some of them gang raped up to 2 times in their life. How do you tell someone who's been raped or even gang raped that the way to get freedom is to forgive? That's tough. That's a big assignment, is it not? It's a huge assignment. Well, something happened this week that was incredible. In my mind, it was miraculous. Usually we give a holiday, like a holiday Monday, we'll take them bowling and we'll take them to the movies, a matinee movie and stuff. Well, this particular 6 weeks had no Monday holiday like we typically have. And one of the women on Tuesday of this week was having a birthday. And so the ladies came in for special permission, the whole house of 18 ladies now. They wanted permission to skip the yoga and meditation. They wanted to go to a movie to celebrate this girl's birthday. And the staff put their heads together and said, why not? You know, they don't get to go to a movie this time like everybody else. So we made a deal that you had to go to the movie or stay home. And because, you know, the movies are all over the place, you have to choose 2 movies. And a bunch of the women wanted to see The Shack, and others wanted to see Beauty and the Beast. So we said, okay, you got to choose between these 2 movies, because one starts at 22, one starts at 7 o'clock, so that way, you know, you're out about the same time. Well, almost everyone chose The Shack. Now, I'd seen The Shack twice in the last few weeks, and I was going, my heart was beating like, oh my goodness, is this a movie about forgiveness or what? Or what? The next day, Wednesday morning, they came in and I said, so let's have a check-in. And along the way, I said, so what do you think about The Shack? And one of them said, Don, you ripped off The Shack. I said, pardon me? You ripped off The Shack. You did tell us you went twice, right? Yeah, I went twice. Well, you were taking notes. You just gave us the whole spiel out of The Shack, right? And I said, not that I know of. I wasn't taking notes. She says, Don, actually, I already figured it out. I talked to Richard, the other counselor, last night, and he said, Don's been given that same class years before The Shack. Because forgiveness is powerful. And these ladies were able to forgive. It was the most profound. Blew me out of the water. And I said to them, I said, think about it. As I think about it, what this guy, Mac, had to forgive in the movie, in the story of The Shack, was probably the worst thing I could possibly think of. You know, if someone abused and murdered and sexually molested me, that's one thing. That would be awful. But to do it to my 5-year-old daughter, that's unforgivable. That would be the worst of the worst, and that's what The Shack's about. Forgiving someone who does that to their 5-year-old daughter. That's powerful. Forgiveness is powerful. It's not fair. It's grace. And it sets us free. It's a part of my week. I always share one story with the clients at work. on forgiveness. And this is not just about forgiveness, it's about forgiveness and reconciliation, which is a whole different ballgame. It's both combined into one in the story. Some of you will probably remember something about this. Apartheid in South Africa, remember? And Nelson Mandela was released out of prison after about 30 years, right? And he became the first prime minister of this new non-apartheid South Africa, right? And he took Archbishop Tutu, one of his good friends, and he put him in charge of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. So what that meant was all the atrocities committed by the police prior to the freedom, prior to the dissolution of apartheid, could be brought to trial and found guilty and punished. The person who would bring them to trial, who would say, you know, you did this to me or my family, would bring them to trial. They'd have a trial. If found guilty, the person who they offended could declare the punishment. They could say, this is what I want. But Archbishop Tutu pleaded for the country to forgive and to reconcile, because if they didn't, this country could go anywhere. He pleaded them to forgive so they could move on. And so here's one of zillions of stories out of South Africa. This elderly lady is there bringing a charge against a guy by the name of Vanderbroek. And she says basically this: years ago, Vanderbroek, a police officer, and his posse came to my door, took my son, and made my husband and me watch as they put my son on a stick and roasted him over a fire. Made us watch. Years later, they came back and took my husband, made me watch them pour gasoline on him and burn him. And so the judge turned to her, and he was found guilty. And the judge turned to her, he's in the stand, and he said, so now, what would you like done, Mr. Vanderbroek? And this is what she said. First, I would like Mr. Vanderbroek to come to the ghetto where I live once a month and spend a day with me, because I want him to become my family, who I no longer have any family. And I want him to get to know me, and I want to get to know him. Second, I want to forgive Mr. Vanderbroek. And I want him to know I've forgiven him and that God has forgiven him. The courtroom broke out in amazing grace. But Mr. Vanderbroek didn't hear a word as he fainted and sank. Father, we thank you ourselves. We are the person in this parable that owe 20 million plus and more. Help us to turn to others. Grant our forgiveness of them, because you have been so generous to us.
It was cold between my fingertips.
Shack is a very controversial movie and book in Christendom. And I think Jesus is a very controversial issue in Christendom. And I promote the movie. I'm not saying I believe in everything it says there, but you know something? Jesus told some pretty bizarre parables. He told a parable of someone who died and went to heaven and someone who died and went to hell, and they're talking to each other and all that stuff. You know, the movie's got some parable-like things in it. It sure makes a point about God. It's careful. Let's pray. Father God, thank you for your forgiveness. As your word said, forgive them, they do not know what they do. And you did this before we even began. Help us, Lord, to understand, to accept it. It's so hard to forgive ourselves. It's so hard. That's the hardest thing, is to forgive ourselves. It's so difficult to forgive some people. Lord, teach us how.
Amen. Thank you so much.